Hello, 8th, and welcome to our lesson. This is for Tuesday, April 21st. Please make sure you've completed everything for Monday 1st before you continue to this video. So you should have the workbook page 122 completed, and then your textbook page should be chapter 25.3, page 734, numbers 1 through 8 completed. For Tuesday's lesson, what we are going to do is correct the workbook page, post the photo. Correct the textbook page, post the photo, and then I'd like you to go ahead and complete page 123. 123 in the workbook, okay? Please make sure all your sentences are in a full detailed sentence, okay? So for example, number 8, company union, a company union is. Okay, 9, sabotage, a sabotage is. So have them as a full sentence. In order to complete them, you'll have to read pages 736 all the way to 741. What I like you to do is also go ahead and complete a total of 6 flashcards, 6 vocabulary cards. Review them because we're not able to test on them like we used to be, but review them and you should be fine. We'd like to go ahead and review page 122 right now, so please take out 122 with a pen, okay? If you did it typed, that would be in a different color. Now, pen, add some details, typed, add some details. We are live, of course. You can see outside the window the original Yankee Stadium in the Bronx. So that's where we are broadcasting from today. Hopefully you enjoy the view. Let's go to page 122. I'll share the screen with you all. And let's go to workbook page 122. Directions. As you read section 3 in your textbook, fill in the chart with examples of 1920 crazes, innovations, artists, and celebrities. For dances, I'm going to read off some big ones. You might have a few more, but let's add in some big ones that you don't have. So dances, the Charleston, the Lindy Hop, the Shimmy, those are 3 big ones. Check out some videos of those dances online if you're interested. Fashions. Bobbed hair, bright red lipstick, short skirts. Music would be jazz, of course. Literature, realist novels by Ernest Hemingway. So you have a lot of realism. Realist novels by Ernest Hemingway. F. Scott Fitzgerald, Sinclair Lewis. So you have realist novels. You can jot down some of the names as well. You have poetry. A big name in poetry would be Edna St. Vincent Millay. You have realist plays by Eugene O'Neill. You have poetry and stories by African Americans. This is a big one. You may want to highlight this one. Make sure you have this. Poetry and stories by African Americans from the Harlem Renaissance. And here's a big name to add, Langston Hughes, including Langston Hughes. Big part of the Harlem Renaissance. Big part of the 1920s altogether and the years that come. Celebrities, okay? We went ahead, we are finishing up the presentation, the English/Social Studies presentation, right? Or maybe you have already done so. Celebrity craze begins really in the 1920s. Here you have your first big celebrities of film that many of you have studied. And you could see with the introduction of talkies, which we know of today is just a traditional movie that has dialogue, that has talking. Many silent screen stars, many of their careers declined and slowly faded away. But celebrities. Charles Lindbergh, who's right here in the top left, is a big celebrity. He flew solo across the Atlantic. 33 straight hours. He has no parachute. He has no map. Nothing along the lines of safety that we would think of today. No safety net, right? Of course, he has no device to call anybody. So he's taken a brave risk. Sports figures such as the boxer Jack Dempsey, baseball player, superstar, the Hall of Famer Babe Ruth. You're going to go ahead and have silent film stars, Mary Pickford, Charlie Chaplin, Lillian Gish. A lot of big names, okay, that are going to come out during this time period. You have the great director of the 10 Commandments, Cecil B. DeMille, whom we know from the great 10 Commandments film in 1956, but we have to remember him from 1923 as well. And you're going to have a lot of directors come up too during this time period. Some that will successfully go into the later 1920s, 1930s with talkies, and some that won't. 6 through 14, match each person with his or her description. Number 6, Louis Armstrong. It's a big one. F, trumpeter who helped create jazz music. 7, Bessie Smith. G, a jazz singer. 8, Ernest Hemingway. I, author of The Sun Also Rises and A Farewell to Arms. A Farewell to Arms, many of you may read that in high school. Big book, big novel of the time period and in the years that follow. Number 9, Sinclair Lewis. H, author of Babbitt and Main Street. 10, Eugene O'Neill. C, playwright who wrote realistic dramas. You can see a lot of individuals are looking for that realism, realistic situations during this time as well. 11, Langston Hughes. E, a poet, very famous poet of the time period. One of the greatest poets of all time. You may want to highlight that name. 12, Zora Neale Hurston. 12 is D, a writer and collector of African American folktales. 13, Babe Ruth. A, hit 60 home runs in a single season, and the record stood for over 30 years. Does anybody know who broke that record? Well, that record was broken in 1961 by another New York Yankee by the name of Roger Maris. Roger Maris would hit 61 home runs in 1961, and that record would be broken with 62 home runs in the late 1990s. 14, Charles Lindbergh. Some of you were confused on him the other day. B, flew solo across the Atlantic Ocean. You have to think of the bravery that it would take for the individual here during that time period with the limited resources to fly from New York to Paris nonstop. We might hop on a plane and go to Europe and not think anything of it. But here's the first person to go such a far distance by himself with limited technology that they had during that time, okay, limited resources, not many safety nets at all, little to none, and taking that brave risk. Number wrong on the top, review the cards, then slice them in the middle. Please make sure you're adding details and not just check marks. So do that, post the photograph. Then what I'd like you to do is turn to page 734, okay, wherever you wrote these. And we're going to go ahead and correct those right now. So 734 corrections, numbers 1 through 8. If you have them typed, type it in a different color. If you have them handwritten, okay, please go ahead and add that in a pen. 734, you're going to see some that are similar. Well, the ones that are similar are going to be your big names. Louis Armstrong, 1A. A musician who helped create jazz. Really important. Not the creator of jazz, but a musician who helped create the jazz and all that came with the music of the time period. B, Ernest Hemingway, a writer who wrote about life, an expatriate life, a lot of realist novels. C, F. Scott Fitzgerald, another big writer, F. Scott Fitzgerald. He's a young writer who told the stories of people during the time period. So a lot of realistic situations there about people during this time period. Right now we hear a lot of happy moments of the 1920s. So we're going to get to a very impactful moment soon enough. Okay, and you're going to see these writers take that and run with it as well, many of them. D, Sinclair Lewis, a writer who created an image of small-town America that was very dull, narrow-minded, not anything, like out of the ordinary, but pretty narrow-minded and dull, pretty boring in a way. Eugene O'Neill, E, he's a writer of realistic dramas, another individual to bring out realistic situations of the time period. F, Langston Hughes, a well-known poet, incredible poet, one of the biggest names of the Harlem Renaissance, one of the biggest names in poetry even to this day. So you see a lot of big writers, a lot of writing. It's the first time we're going to see writing really get to this high level in the sense of creativeness, in the sense of realistic situations, and just the variety that you have is so much more than ever before. G. Countee Cullen, G. Harlem Renaissance poet, another very famous poet of the Harlem Renaissance. Claude McKay, H. Another Harlem Renaissance poet that you should know some names just to be familiar with. Zora Neale Hurston, I. was an African-American writer who collected folklore, songs, and prayers of African-American Southerners. J. Babe Ruth, arguably the greatest baseball player, greatest athlete of all time. Some people say that to this day, but he was without a doubt the most popular baseball player in the 1920s. Many would say the most popular star of the 1920s, especially when it comes to sports. And, you know, when you walk in the Baseball Hall of Fame today, you walk right in, there's a great exhibit on him, a larger-than-life exhibit, because of a larger-than-life personality. Anybody who's interested in him, there's some great documentaries out there. Really, really big superstar, one of those first big sports superstars of the time. J and K should be highlighted or starred. K, Charles Lindbergh, he made the first solo nonstop flight across the Atlantic Ocean. First solo nonstop flight across the Atlantic Ocean, something we take for granted today. Somebody had to do it first, and that was our great friend Charles Lindbergh. 2A, fad. A fad is an activity or fashion that is taken up with great passion for a short time. So think of a fad that we might have today. It's something, an activity or a fashion that so many people are obsessed with, and as fast as it goes up, it comes down. Remember a few years ago when people were going around catching Pokemon? That seemed like that craze went up so fast. Everybody was doing it so quickly. And before you knew it, nobody was doing it. It just dropped, right? That was the new fad. What is something that we may have today that's a new fad, something that people are obsessed with, that everybody does? Think of some things that have been popular in your lifetime that all of a sudden they go up so fast and then just fall down. Flappers. Basically, these are young women, okay, who rebelled against traditional ways of thinking and acting. They wore their hair cut short, wore shorter dresses, shorter than other Americans had ever seen, and they wore bright red lipstick. So women who really rebelled against that time period, they were seen as flappers. Jazz was another innovation in the 1920s. It was born in New Orleans, but it combined West African rhythms and African-American work songs and spiritual and European harmonies. Jazz is going to become one of the most popular types of music of the time period. Expatriate. Expatriate is a big word for you all to know, okay? People who leave their country to live in a foreign land. Think of someone who's a patriot, really stands for this country, but an expatriate, someone who leaves their country to come to a foreign land, particularly now the United States, as it's ever changing. Take a moment and jot down those details. 3, how did flappers reflect changes in American fashion? Well, the behavior of the flappers symbolized the expanding freedom of women. Of course, that freedom is nowhere where it needs to be, but it's expanding. It's growing. So these flappers were seen as very rebellious. Nobody had ever seen women dressed like this before. Look at the photos that I have on this page of women during the time period. Some of you might say, Mr. A, what's wrong with any of these photos? Well, during that time, it's like, wow, these women are dressing, acting differently than they are supposed to. Because think of how women were supposed to behave and act during the other time periods that we talked about. 4, what aspects of American life did writers criticize that they went against? Okay, there was a great emphasis and overemphasis on money and fun, small town narrow-mindedness, and you're going to see this continue, racism that they criticize. 5, what themes did the writers of the Harlem Renaissance address in their work? What were some themes that these great writers addressed in their work? So, who are some of these writers that we know about from the Harlem Renaissance? Well, think of Langston Hughes, Countee Cullen, Claude McKay, and many great others, okay? Some of the themes will include, okay, their experiences of African Americans, their experience of living in America at the time, what they faced, okay, and what other African Americans faced. Injustice and racism that they faced, other individuals faced during that time period, a lynching and violence that is going to be ever present, African American heritage and African American pride as well. So a lot of scary situations, a lot of situations that they want the nation to move past, but also a lot of pride, a lot of heritage as well. 6, why was Charles Lindbergh a hero? 6, you may want to put a star next to 5 and 6. 6, with his solo non-stop transatlantic flight, he accomplished something no one had ever done before. Many will do it since. So we've had many people in this room, right, that would say 33 hours to go from New York to Paris. Mr. It doesn't take that long. It takes about 8 hours or so. I could get there. Why did it take so long? Well, this is the first time it had ever been done before. Think of the plane that he was in. Very much smaller than any we would ever use before. Had to fly a lot lower, okay, a lot lower than traditional planes, just because of how it was built during that time period. And he took a great risk. There was a great chance he would not have made that, right, flight. Something could have easily gone wrong. He does make it, and he does show us that a lot is possible with transportation. And as technology improves, more and more individuals are going to successfully make a flight like that, complete a flight like that in less amount of time, and really set a great standard. He did set a great standard, and that will be continued for many years. But there will be some scary situations involving others as well. Main idea. While new lifestyles and new ideas affected fashion and music, a new generation of writers rebelled or criticizing American life. That was interesting because you generally wouldn't hear writers criticize American life before. Describe 3 cultural achievements of the 1920s. We're going to go over a few, add a few more. You might have, your answers may vary. But please add that there were bold new styles for women, never seen before. Jazz was a new kind of music, and there was a new realistic and critical literature. So you had writing that went ahead and criticized some ways of American life, and that had never been seen before. Again, taking great risks to show some viewpoints, realistic viewpoints of the time. Review Edna St. Vincent Millay's poem on page 732. How does it reflect the spirit of the 1920s? So if you took a look, guys, if you have your textbook, go to 732 now. Here's what she states. My candle burns at both ends. It will not last the night. But my foes and oh, my friends, it gives a lovely light. Pretty interesting. It gives a lovely light. It emphasizes the joys and pleasure of today without concern for consequences that may come with it. It suggests the era's very frantic pace, a pace that had never been seen before. Our life is really fast paced nowadays. I know this change that we've been facing with the whole virus pandemic, our pace of life has been very different. But this fast pace of life is really going to begin in the 1920s. You're going to have more individuals commute to work. You're going to have a greater connection throughout the world, never seen before. Great innovations, great interventions, and great changes to come. And some consequential changes too. Please mark the corrections number wrong on the top. Don't just put check marks. Add some details. Please always watch carefully. Now go ahead and complete the next text workbook page. Full sentences on that. Read the chapter carefully. Please let me know if you have any questions. Until next time, live from the only Yankee Stadium that matters in Mr. A's mind. This is today's lesson, and this is Soul Studies. We'll see you there.